Today is Lesson 16, the New England Colonies. Once the settlement at Plymouth was established, British colonization increased quickly. While the Spanish, French, and Dutch were also settling in America, England began to form larger colonies, which will eventually become states. In early America, there were 13 British colonies that were divided into three regions: the New England, or northern colonies, middle colonies, and southern colonies. Life in each region was very different. Some of the factors that made them different were their geography, industry, and religion. We will spend time exploring all three regions, but for today, put on the warmest coat because we are headed to the New England colonies. Geography. While all of the 13 original colonies were located along the east coast of America, the New England colonies were the farthest north. That means they were the farthest from the equator, an invisible line around the middle of our planet. The areas near the equator are the closest to the sun, and therefore have the warmest weather. Being that New England is far from the equator, what do you imagine the weather is like? Let's just take an activity break here, if you have a globe handy. Look at the globe or the map of the U.S. Find the state of New Hampshire. New Hampshire was part of the New England colonies. How far is New Hampshire from the equator compared to the distance between the equator and where you live? Which is closer? If you have trouble with this, have your teacher show you. What do you think the weather differences are between where you live and New Hampshire? If you guessed that the weather was cold, you would be correct. While the temperatures in New England can be warm during the summer months, it also has extremely cold winters with lots of snow. It also means a shorter farming season than the other regions that made up the colonies. The temperature wasn't the only challenge with the New England geography. There was also the issue that much of the soil was rocky, meaning that it was difficult to plant and farm the land. But thankfully, what New England lacked in terms of warmer temperature and soil that was good for farming, it made up for in other resources. Much of the area was covered with dense forests, which meant plenty of wood for fires and building homes. The forests were home to many animals, which provided food for the colonists' belly and fur to keep them warm. There were also many lakes, rivers, and ponds full of fish, and of course, being located near the fish and even the whales. We will talk soon about why whales were so important to the New England colonists, but for now, just remember that it was cold, rocky, tree-filled region containing plenty of animals and fish. Industry refers to how a particular area makes money and sustains its lifestyle. Some areas have an industry that is based on natural resources like logging or mining, while other areas the main industry is farming. Some cities have a large industry that centers around manufacturing or financial services. Talk with your family about the area where you live. What is the main industry in your area? A good way to figure it out is to think about the jobs that most people have where you live. Each region of colonies has its own unique industries. In the New England colonies, most people make money fishing, whaling, or building ships. Remember, we said that fish were plentiful in this area due to all the rivers, lakes, and ocean access. So fishermen were able to bring in great catches and sell them for a profit. Whaling was another important industry for this region. When the colonists would catch a whale, they would melt the blubber down to make oil. The oil was used for lamps and soap. They were also able to make very expensive candles using a substance that came from the whale's head. And every now and then, if a whaler was particularly lucky, they would find something like ambergris in the whale's bowels. This very valuable material was used to make perfume. It's hard to imagine that something pulled from the bowels of a whale would smell good, but apparently it did. New England was also known for its shipbuilding industry. At first, ships were built to support the fishing industry. But after a while, all the colonies began to trade with each other, and the fastest way to travel up and down the coast was by ship. Soon the colonies were trading with their homeland, England, and other European countries. This created a great demand for ships, and the New England colonies had the trees to meet the demand. Religion. Do you recall what some of the first British settlers in the New England colonies were called? If you said pilgrims, you are correct. They had another name, separatists. They had journeyed from England to Holland for religious freedom, to separate themselves from the Church of England, and finally to the New World to continue their way of life without secular interference. Eventually, more like-minded families made their way to New England. By the 1640s, the settlement of Massachusetts Bay contained over 10,000 people. These settlers were Puritans, a group of Christians who believed that the Bible contained within its instructions for daily living, and that the Church of England should not continue ceremonies and practices that weren't rooted in the Bible. This belief was very different from many churches of their time, and was the driving force for their leaving England to live in the New World. With the exception of Rhode Island, the colonies of New England were Puritan. It may seem strange to us, but American Puritans were known for their intolerance of other religion. But this was, after all, the reason they left England to begin with, to establish a place where they could worship and live without interference from others. As an activity break, you can take a minute to talk about everything you learned today. Share something about New England colonies from each of the categories: geography, industry, and religion. And that concludes our lesson 16 for today.